Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining this session this evening. We are about to start. I will be introducing our guest shortly. Just want you to put a thumbs up if you can hear audio clearly. Let us know if any issues you're experiencing from a technical side. Just put a note. If we're good on audio, give us the thumbs up there. Um, it promises to be an exciting time. We've had loads of questions coming, as we said about an hour ago in the short clip that we sent out, and we are looking forward to a really exciting session this evening. Um, as we go on in the session, please subscribe to the page, like, follow. There are a number of websites that are broadcasting this live. We've got a session on the Synctaface Media Facebook page. We've got it on the Wale Akiemi resource page. We've got this also broadcasting on the Believers Faith Campaign page. It's also on YouTube. You can look for lessons learned from COVID-19 pandemic on YouTube. There are a number of YouTube channels that are picking this feed up at this time as well. So without further ado, let's get into this. And I would like to introduce our first guest today, um, who happens to be my brother, Dr. Wale Akiemi. Dr. Wale has been an organizational culture and leadership expert. He works with United Nations. He's done some work for the United Nations. He works with uh, business leaders, government leaders, advising them on different issues, different topics that are of concern. And he's got quite a lot of experience in the leadership area that would be good to hear from his experience. Dr. Wale, you're welcome. Moving on, we have Professor Bolaji Akiemi, who was a former Minister of External Affairs in Nigeria. Prof, you are welcome to the show. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
We look forward to having an exciting time with you here. Just before I bring Dr. Wale back in, Prof, we have a question for you. When you look back at your life, what is the one incident that you would say has had the most profound impact on your life?
Well, I think it was when I became Minister of External Affairs, being in charge of articulating and projecting the views and values and interests of, 200 million people. Before then, I had been a professor of international relations and the Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. In the first two positions, I had done a lot of talking, a lot of research, and when I became a minister, that then became an opportunity to see whether I could walk the talk. So I think being the minister, brought together all the the preparation and the opportunity that I then had to see whether an intellectual could also be a policy maker.
So, were you looking forward did you have an inkling that you were going to be in such a post when you were lecturing?
No, um, it was a political appointment, and that's one thing you don't plan for because it is all at the behest of whoever the president is. And as it turned out, in between my being a university lecturer and becoming a minister, there were, I believe, three or four heads of states.
Oh, fantastic. And at the time you became minister, how different was that from what you were doing before?
Oh, very, very different. Very different. Because as a scholar, you could speak your mind, and if challenged, uh, the pushback will be, well, that's my opinion, that's my view, that's the conclusion that I've drawn from my research. But as a minister, as I said earlier, you are projecting the views of 200 million people subject to approval by the president. So you really were not the final say. Um, your views, your proposals were subject to approval by the president. But they need, I mean, you have to be conscious of the fact that the nation was made up of 200 million people and not just one person because he was a minister. Quite different.
Wow. 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 Okay, so one of the questions, and earlier I said this just before we went live, sir, is we put out fillers to a panel, and they came back to us with over 40 questions. And I looked at this and I thought, oh, wow, we can have just you for 3 hours going through all these different questions. But then we thought, you know what, we've got to make the best of the time we have here. Um,
Mhm.
and the first question that I want to ask you, sir, is considering all the progress made over the years by both the developed world and developing countries, why do you think the pandemic still appears like it caught the world unprepared?
Well, not that it appears it caught us unprepared. It did catch us unprepared. And that was unfortunate because even though the pandemic is the first of its type, the first of its type in its own DNA, somebody like Obama warned 5 years ago that we should be expecting something like this. I mean, obviously, the scientists had an inkling, had a suspicion. But then, you see, the moment you say 5 years, politicians, whether in the West or in the East or in the developing countries, don't want to think 5 years ahead of time. They want to think of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years maximum, and then they're thinking of the next election. So in allocating resources, they, they just don't believe that the electorate will be interested in their allocating resources towards something that they're not really sure will come. Number two, at least in the United States, there was pettiness and ego tripping in the sense that all the institutions that were put in place by Obama and some which Obama inherited from Bush were scrapped by Trump for reasons best known to him. He will not claim responsibility for it, but the fact is that the United States that could have given leadership in responding to this virus was unprepared, deliberately unprepared.
So, would you say, from a lesson learned perspective, would you say then that um, foresight is an important trait for our leaders to have?
Most certainly foresight, but also, and I haven't come to a conclusion. I'm still turning this over in my mind. The kind of governance that we have, which is based on these 4 years elections, we probably need to revisit it and find ways in which we can bring mature leadership into governance, and not just people who want to get there and they have no clue what to do once they get there.
Hmm. Hmm. So, Dr. Wale, Prof is saying there that leadership, foresight is important in leadership. With
Mm,
the work that you do with some of the organizations you work for,
mm,
how would you build leader foresight within an organization?
Mm. Um, First thing is that, we need to differentiate between a leader and an office holder. There's a big difference. A lot of people pie these offices are not actually leaders. One of the things I tell all of them is that if you're not a leader before you get into the office, you will have problems.
Wow.
So you ask about foresight. Uh, that is part of leadership, the ability to look at different scenarios, look at best case, look at worst case. But unfortunately, there's something that happens many times when people get into the office that intoxicates them. I have never held a political appointment. Prof didn't push enough buttons for me. But you find out that there is this thing that intoxicates a lot of these people, that when they get into the office, they forget that there is going to be a legacy after. And they're so consumed with present, they don't think of the future. One of the ways I define legacy is, how do you want to be defined when you are no more there to defend yourself? That is legacy. And you see, when a person dies, there is the date of birth, then there's a dash, and then there's the date of death. You see, that dash in the middle, that is what represents the legacy. And you will always be remembered. Everybody is going to be remembered either as a warning or as an inspiration. I
Wow.
remember when Prof left Foreign Affairs, somebody wrote a tribute to him in the newspaper that I read and said the greatest tribute to Professor Akinyemi is that when he left, they had to replace him with two people, because then you now had a minister for foreign affairs and then a minister of state for foreign affairs,
Hmm.
and I think that was a great legacy. So the way to take care of the future of foresight is to always remember, number one, I will soon be an X, no matter what the office is. So I need to have a wholesome picture of yesterday, today, and where we are going.
Wow. 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 So, as a leader, foresight is important, forward planning is important. Um, Sir, in this age of rapid change, what kind of time frame should make sense in this sort of forward planning and foresight?
Is that for Prof or for
Um,
me?
I can hardly hear you.
Okay.
Your voice has gone very low. I hardly even heard Dr. Wally speaking.
Okay, we'll adjust that there. Um, so the question was, in this age of change, where change is very rapid, what type of time frame would be a reasonable time frame for someone to be thinking about as a leader?
Well, it's I mean, frankly, I can't put an age or a time frame on that. What is essential is that there should be planning in the life of the individual, number one. Number two, there should be a system in place. And number three, there should be an institution in place. When you marry the three, then you will eventually come up with a template that allows for experience and knowledge to be gathered before reaching policy positions where you then become a decision maker. You just can't parachute someone into the position of a policy maker. No,
Wow.
that won't work. I mean, occasionally you may be lucky, but um, you don't become a general without becoming a colonel.
Mm,
You don't become a colonel without becoming a captain. There is a reason why you have all those gaps. And it's the same thing. You don't become a permanent secretary without having spent maybe 10, 15 years in the ministry. You don't become the prime minister without, as far as I'm concerned, without having spent maybe 10 years in parliament. But to become a prime minister or to even become a minister after just 1 year or 2 years in parliament, you will end up making decisions. And I wouldn't want to particularize this because we have evidence of the past 10 years where, I would say immature people were parachuted into that position of prime minister. They ended up pushing their countries into taking issues or presenting issues to their countries which have landed their countries in a lot of trouble.
wow. Wow. Wow.
But Tunde, can I come in here? Prof, isn't that the downside of the democracy we are practicing? Because, democracy has a way of projecting the lowest level of intelligence to the top just because they are popular. So how do we come up? Because I am an advocate of let us come up with our own system that works. But this system that we are practicing and all this, I think there is a fundamental problem there. I don't know what Prof has to say about it. Because you find out a country like Nigeria, you have so many brilliant minds. A lot of these brilliant minds are not given space in the Nigerian context. So they are outside doing all sorts of things. But you look at the context of Nigeria, we are projecting low levels of intelligence to the top. And that happens across Africa a lot. So is it time, Prof, for us to rethink the model by which we rule ourselves?
Well, you see, I understand you, and I hear you. Uh, Look at John F. Kennedy,
Mhm.
or look at Obama. Uh, Two young people who probably did not have sufficient experience before getting to the presidency, but they surrounded themselves with the brightest and the best that they could get in the United States. The problem with Africa and Nigeria that I've mentioned has been that when the leadership had managed to get into office, and I deliberately use the word managed because frankly, I don't believe we've had free and fair and transparent elections in Africa. But nevertheless, once a president had then got into office, he tended to look for people who will not outshine him. And so it is incompetence that is then promoted into office. And that's the problem. Whereas if they will pick brains which are available in Africa, which are available in Kenya, which are available in Nigeria, which are available in South Africa, if you will bring in this brightest and the best in each of those countries, then in fact you can compensate for the immaturity or incompetence of the leadership. But this doesn't happen.
Okay, sir.
That is the problem with our system.
As a follow-on to that question, one of the questions we have here for you says, um, what do you make of the response of African leaders to the coronavirus situation, bearing in mind that Africa has been lagging behind in terms of the number of cases compared to the rest of the world? That should have given our African leaders enough time to start to make preparations on what to do if this thing gets to Africa the way it is in Europe at the minute. Do you think that preparation is enough now?
Let us try and be fair. Nobody understands this virus. We don't understand how it works. We don't understand how it operates. Therefore, no one can come up with the best template to address it. We're all playing catch up, including the West.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with catch up is you're not really sure of what the should be. You are addressing something that happened 5 days ago with this virus rather than what ought to happen. I understand what people are worried about, which is lockdown when you don't have in place a system where you can, a social system where you can address the fact that most Africans, almost people in the third world, live on a daily subsistence. So when you lock down, you deny them that. And you now don't have a system where you can use government resources to cope with the consequences of the lockdown. I understand perfectly. Good argument. However, when you are dealing with a virus that even you and I must not face each other, we must have, is it 12 feet or whatever that is, then what is the alternative to locking down? I'm afraid I don't have an answer. Maybe Dr. Wale will have an answer, or the people sending in the question to you may have proposals, but I don't have an answer to the complexity of this COVID-19.
So what I hear you say there, sir, is that the people need to be fair with their leaders in this situation.
Yes, people need to be fair to leaders, whether the leaders are in Africa or elsewhere. Look at the debate that is going on in the United States.
Yes.
Is it the economy that we should address, or the health of the people? If you go and reopen businesses too early and corpses start lying on the street, insufficient coffins, insufficient burial grounds, they will crucify Trump and those governors who reopened businesses too early. But if they reopen businesses and nothing happens medically, health-wise, nothing happens, then they will be heroes. But to tell you the truth, I wouldn't predict who will be a hero next week or the week after in this COVID-19 that we are facing. And maybe this really presents, well, people who are in the field, an opportunity to develop a template of leadership when confronted with issues like this, unpredictable and what have you. But the thing is, listen to the scientists, listen to the medical people. In terms of this COVID-19, listen to them. When you have other economic issues or issues of development, listen to the economists, listen to the sociologists, just listen to the people in the field before you take a decision. Somebody has to take a decision. Somebody has to take the bullet. I mean, it's part of the price you pay for leadership. If you take the wrong decision, then you lose the next election. And if you take the right decision and you have the grace of God backing you, then you win the next election. I mean, I will say Obama has been lucky that he never faced COVID-19 when he was there.
Yeah.
He didn't face it. And I dare say that the financial crisis that he faced, yes, Obama saved the banks, he saved the motor companies, but he sacrificed the ordinary people. He didn't look after their interests. He looked only after the interests of the banks and the motor companies.
Oh, wow. Well, Dr. Wali, let me come over to you. Prof has touched on some points in terms of the medical side as well. This is not something anyone has dealt with. One of the challenges we have is that COVID-19 is real. And people are talking about vaccines. But then we've got the fear of vaccines suddenly rising, people feeling scared to take vaccines. What kind of message do you feel we need to be giving to people who feel a bit hopeless in this time? Dr. Wale.
Let me first talk about the vaccines, because there's a lot of conspiracy theories, there's a lot of stuff going on about the vaccines. And my position has been, you know what? A A lot of the people that are complaining and, would not even be alive if not for vaccines that were developed earlier. Yellow fever, polio, and all these things, they were killing people, smallpox. All right? So these are things that vaccines, and I heard someone pray, I think it was Kenneth Copeland that prayed. He said, God, give people the wisdom to come up with the right vaccine. And Nancy Pelosi said that science, some of these solutions are actually answers to prayer. Because I think of number of people that would have died without such interventions. So I would say that let's be open-minded about that. Now, I am not saying that people may not have ulterior motives, but what I am saying is that it is too early. This is the same way there was a time, there was a vaccine, people said, oh, they are trying to use this to reduce the population. There will always be those stories. So I am not going to knock off what is a possible solution because of some conspiracy theories. That's just the way I look at that. And you said, what message of hope? Nobody has any experience in a post-COVID world. Nobody. And I like to look at it from the perspective of Noah's Ark. You see, the cheetah is the fastest animal. So it probably got to the ark before the others. But the ark could not go anywhere until the slowest animal entered. So the speed of the cheetah was not an advantage in the ark. In the same way, this scenario has slowed down a lot of people, but it has created an opportunity for people to build capacity for a post-COVID world. It has created an opportunity. We run what we call the Street University on Zoom, and it's maxed out, because people are learning. So I would advise anybody, don't think you are on holiday. This is a time where the cheetahs cannot go forward. So you have an opportunity to build some capacity. Abraham Lincoln said, if I'm given 8 hours to cut down a tree, I will spend 6 hours sharpening my axe. This is our opportunity as individuals, as organizations, even as countries, to sharpen our axe. I'll tell you what's happening in Kenya. Suddenly, we have one of our counties producing face masks, 35,000 face masks a day. They repurposed the company. They were doing aprons and other things before to do face masks. All of a sudden, you find out that there are areas where local production is now coming up. This might be the opportunity we have to build things to a point where we do not have to depend on China even for toothpicks. I think we have a great opportunity right now, and I think we should look at that and see how we can capitalize on it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Wale. Sir, there's a question from Facebook here, Kemi Santos. What do you consider to be the biggest leadership challenge that African countries are facing today? What do you consider to be the biggest leadership challenge that African countries are facing today?
The biggest challenge is the inability, two things. One, inability of people, not just the leaders, people to see beyond their ethnic or tribal nose. We all have this beautiful debate when we are talking theory. Come election time, it then becomes, is my brother I'm going to vote for? Is somebody from my clan I'm going to vote for? Is somebody from my, whatever it is? We ourselves immediately limit our choice. And when we do that, we have dealt ourselves a big blow. Secondly, we don't, let us be frank with ourselves. We don't have free, fair, and transparent elections in Africa. South Africa is probably the only exception that I can think of. Others who come from that area may have a different view. But in the rest of Africa, believe me, the elections are not free, they are not fair, they are not transparent. So a combination of those two form what I will call the bane of leadership. That's what prevents us in Africa from getting our brightest and the best into government positions, into elective positions. I mean, your question, I'm sure, he himself knows about examples in Africa, different African countries.
Yes, yes.
I know of an activist, a social activist who was a lawyer. I use was because he's dead now. And if he called for a demonstration in Lagos, believe me, he will get thousands to come out and follow him for the demonstration. He then decided to run for the presidency. He didn't get up to 200 votes.
Wow.
Because when that came, the issue of being elected president came, people were now looking back at who was from their own ethnic base, rather than this man who had captured the imagination of even the young people. Even the young people didn't vote for him.
Wow.
And in the last election, in presidential elections in Nigeria, so many young people stood up, but where were their supporters when it came to voting for them? Where were they? They were nowhere to be found.
Wow.
So to me, we need to address those two issues. And I will even still, I will say this, the bigger of the two issues is really the mindset of the average African himself.
Wow.
If the average African can see beyond his ethnic nose, then we can counter the question of electoral corruption that follows.
Wow. And that leads us nicely to this point, which, sir, I think I'd want you to respond to this before Dr. Wale does. So another question talks about, it's often said that foreign exchange remittances back to the motherland constitute one of the top three economic blocks. And there are some calls that the government should start to get Nigerians in the diaspora to return to Nigeria specifically. What do you say to that thought, sir?
Um, I think there is a non sequitur there because the money, the foreign exchange that is sent back is actually sent back to individuals, to brothers, to sisters, to grandma, to fathers left behind here. They are not really remitted to government. And I will not advocate that it should be remitted to government. It will be stolen. Remitting it to family, remitting it to the serves its own purpose. It is used for education of the siblings. It is used to build houses and whatever it is that the family may need. Whereas if government gets its hands on it, that's it. You are not going to find out what exactly they did with it.
With the money. Dr.
But
Wale.
the second aspect of the question as to whether people in the diaspora should come home, let me surprise you. My answer is no. Don't come home. You will be frustrated by the establishment, by the system. Stay where you are. A time is going to come when they will beg you to come back home, and the system will have got to such a stage that your coming home is going to make a difference. There was a time where Africa is now, is probably where India was under Nehru and the first three prime ministers. A lot of Indians stayed in England, they stayed in the United States, they stayed abroad, sharpening their talents and what have you. Now, Indians in the diaspora have been able to go back home and develop this massive technological, electronic, nuclear, and space. Made their contribution to space technology. That they are coming back to India has made a lot of difference.
Wow.
Be patient.
Okay.
Wait for that, and it will happen.
Wow. So a principle there is the principle of patience. Be patient. Anybody aspiring to be a leader also needs to learn patience. Their time will come as well.
Yeah.
Good. Dr. Wale, there's a question here. I'll come.
Tunde, before you go into that, can I address something that Prof talked about? The young people, he talked about the activists. And I think it's a very valid thing. And I think it's something that the young generation and the intellectuals, the young intellectuals, should be educated about. Now, what is it? It is that, you see, there is a difference between the idealist and the pragmatist. And you find out that a lot of the activists and this young generation that we're talking about, they are idealists. Now, the idealist position is, this is the way it must be. It is either this way or the highway. The pragmatic position is, we agree, this is the way it should be. But within this context and within the context of integrity, I'm not saying do something illegal. So we agree this is the way it should be.
Yeah.
But within this context, this is the way it will work.
Okay.
Now, you find out that a lot of activists find it, and a lot of people find it difficult to cross over and win elections because it is a pragmatic perspective or pragmatic position that will help you to win the elections. And many people don't have that. So I think the young generation should be schooled in that. And we don't train people for leadership. That is another big problem.
Wow. Wow. We've got a question here from YouTube. Um, Actually, Dr. Wale, I'll start with you on this one. Was there any other way to manage this pandemic without shutting down the global economy?
Wow, you're asking me. I think you should ask the professor. So, Prof,
Well,
over to you, sir.
you know, who I think this issue had been dealt with earlier on. This is a virus that jumps through human contact. I dislike the phrase social distancing. I would prefer to use the phrase physical distancing because I could be physically separated from you, but maintain eye contact. Eye contact is social connection. Then we don't feel disconnected. I could be physically separated from you and still wave or bow or give you the Indian greetings of two palms together. And that way, sociologically, we are still human beings connected. But medically, we must be physically disconnected because of the nature of the transmission of the virus. Now, people have talked about masks. And I listen a lot. I mean, there's nothing else to listen to these days if you turn up the television. And the scientists can't even agree on whether the masks prevent me from infecting you or prevent you from infecting me. But I think a consensus is out there now that we should put on the mask when we are outside. But this cannot work within an industrial space. It's only in terms of, there are only a few, very few businesses that you can wear the mask and still have the physical distance. Only a few. So we just have to play this by the ball. We just have to take decisions and hope we are right. And when decision makers are wrong in terms of the consequences, I hope we will be magnanimous enough to know that they did their best. They were not being wicked in the policy of in the policies that they put in place. They did their best. This is and you see, what worries me, and I must say this, is that because we cannot predict the DNA of this coronavirus, this is 19. And I don't know when the next one, Corona 25 or Corona 20, will come. But because we cannot predict the DNA, we cannot even put policies in place in anticipation of the next coronavirus. The only thing I know is there's going to be a next one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't wish it, but that is the truth. And we are not going to know what his DNA is going to be, how it will be transmitted. It's only after it comes that we will then start to scramble. And as I say, let's be magnanimous in judging those taking decisions.
Okay. Dr. Wale, let me come to you on this question here. For someone who advises business leaders, government leaders, how difficult is it to operationalize some of the policies that are being made to deal with this challenge? And maybe we broaden that scope a little bit, not just the challenge of COVID-19, which is unique in itself, but uh, policies that affect the masses on a large scale. How easy is it to implement these things and bring the benefit to the masses?
From the experience on the ground here and some of the things that I've been privileged to be part of, it's difficult. And I will tell you why it's difficult. We want people to stay at home, but they have to eat. How do we balance that? Then there are also, and I think this is across the continent, which Prof had alluded to, one of our biggest leadership challenges has been the issue of interests. In that, yes, we know this is what we need to do right now, but there are certain interests that, and unfortunately, you see, some of the decisions, and I know Prof, when he was in government, we know that there are some decisions that you have to make at a level that may not be populist, but will serve the greater good in the long term. I will give you an example. On day one of the curfew here, it was bad. The police went all out. It was really bad. And it was so bad, the president later on apologized. But you see, is it that those people going out were suicidal? No. They have not been educated. And this is one of the things I have spoken about so much. I said, look, the media has the role of informing, entertaining, and educating. So when we lack sufficient education, then what happened? People went out, then the police had to come in, and it was really bad. But let's look after that. Do you know that people generally stayed at home? So you now find yourself in a dilemma that, yes, the police came out and were brutal, but is that the effect of media not educating people?
But is it the responsibility of media to educate the people?
Sorry?
I said, is it the responsibility of the media to educate the people?
Well, they have a part to play. I worked with the Ministry of Sanitation also. Yeah, we've done stuff. And one of the things that is now happening is talking about this, going out. Everybody has a role to play. But I think, let me give you, look, before this thing happened, you had companies that were sponsoring huge gaming events, sponsoring concerts and things like that. Since this thing happened, I have not seen companies come forward to sponsor a whole campaign for a week to teach people what to do and what not to do. And then also, I think it is important we look at our own peculiar situation. You have places all across Africa where that, what Prof said, physical distancing is not possible. 10 people are living in one small room. It's not possible. And this is where I think our own homegrown solutions must emerge.
Fantastic.
One of the things that inspired me a lot when Prof was foreign minister was initiatives like the Concert of Medium Powers, you know, and initiatives where we're saying, let us form our own power blocks and come up with our own unique solutions.
Wow. I do remember that. And I think that was a major initiative. The thought behind it was a major. But Prof, let me come to you with this. You've been in government. You've worked in government at the highest levels. If you were in government today, what sector would you give priority funding?
Dr. Wale addressed the issue of a post-COVID-19 Africa. And I couldn't agree more with him. And that really would be my priority, to use this crisis to build up an industrial and economic base for Nigeria as well as for Africa. Because fortunately, at least we Africans have developed or have adopted a template of a continental approach in terms of seeking solution to our problems.
Yeah.
There are so many issues that have arisen that while I am globalist in my own mindset, the globe has to be made up of the sum of various national inputs. And in this case, I think the lesson we've learned from this COVID-19 crisis is that there are areas that countries must become self-sufficient and not depend on importation. And that's why I started my answer by making reference to something that Dr. Wale has said earlier on. We should stop importing toothpicks. We should, for the next crisis, even if not for the next crisis, there's a lot of pollution globally. We do need these masks, even after this crisis is over, because there's a lot of pollution.
Wow.
I mean, one of the things that gladdened my heart was to see, animals on the streets of the world. Fish in Venice Canal that they hadn't seen for over a century because the industrial and visitors boats had driven them away. The streams became clean. The sky became clean. Birds were able to again sing. That's something we must look for a way of retaining even after we go back to our industrial production. But if I were in government in Nigeria, or I mean, in fact, it will be the easiest job because we will be starting from base zero in terms of building an industrial base. And that's really what I wouldn't even want to be foreign minister. I would want to be minister of industries.
Wow. All right. Thank you so much, sir. We have 2 minutes to the end of this very informative session. Dr. Wale, in 1 minute, what would be your advice to someone who says, I want to be a leader in the future? Someone in their 20s, someone in their 30s, or even younger. What would be your advice to them in 1 minute?
First of all, be a leader in the closet. The character that will help you succeed in public is developed in the closet. If we try to help a butterfly come out of the cocoon, it will never fly. So don't start from the top, grow to the top.
Excellent, fantastic. I want to thank you both very much for this session today. There have been loads of questions. If we have not been able to answer your questions online, we apologize. We've run out of time now. But do send them in. You can go to Facebook on Wale Akinyemi resource page. There's a lot of information on there that will help you. And I'm sure that sometime in the near future, I will have the prof back and maybe Dr. Wale back, because there are just so many questions here that we have not been able to get to. But I thank you both very much for your time. We really appreciate you. We appreciate your time. And that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you to our viewers for watching. And look out for the next interview. We've got some really interesting guests lined up. Look out for that.